Hello, welcome to the fourth episode now of the Living Room Podcast. I am joined, as per the usual, with James,
Hello?
as well as the Schizoid Man,
What up?
as well as first comer, Shayne.
Hi, everybody.
Um, um, all right. So, uh, things we wanted to talk about today. Schizoid wanted to bring up. He wanted to talk about cops. So, given that you brought it up, I'll let you start the conversation.
Well, you said, does anyone have any ideas? And so that was the first thing that came to mind. Cops are bad.
Are we doing this
Well, I'll
again?
go into more into depth than that. The reason why I was thinking about that was I just came back from fishing and we got pulled over by some fishing game wardens,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Sorry, I didn't have any ideas. I can
Wow.
go into why cops are bad.
The
Uh,
whole fish and game thing is crazy to me because, if the fish that you catch is like a couple centimeters under regulation, it's literally like a fine. Like you'll be fined for having a fish that's slightly too small. This is the
Or
type of thing they pull.
Or if you don't have a fishing license, which I just got my fishing license yesterday. Do you want to hear the excruciating process of getting your fishing license? It's a really
I
terrible process. You
I
ready to
did not
hear it?
even know there was a fishing license, and now I'm very intrigued. Now you have to run me
Yes,
through this.
here's how you get a fishing license. You pay the government some money.
is that
So it's
it?
extortion.
Is
Yeah,
that-
that's it. And so
To be honest, I was expecting like a
I was
DMV
with
horror
someone
story.
I was with someone who we all
I was
handed
expecting like a
the
2 year
warden our fishing
process.
license. We all handed the warden our fishing license, and one of our friends, his license expired. So the warden said, "No fishing for you." We were lucky that we were not escorted off and back on land, and they were watching us from afar through binoculars, and he couldn't fish. So because he didn't pay up the money. He didn't pay up the extortion because it's an extortion racket.
Everyone on this
Schizoid, you
boat is
realize?
allowed to fish, but this one guy, he's not allowed to fish.
And he's the
That's
actual
so funny.
fisherman. Like he's the actual fisherman.
You want to
Like
think
he
about
knew how to
something
fish.
funny.
That's such a
Imagine,
like just a
seriously, imagine for
funny
a second
thing.
that you're dealing with like you're on the boat, right? And
Hmm.
like the whole time, these guys are just on shore with their binoculars staring over at you. How long were you out for?
We're not for very long. It was a test run. We just bought a boat, but yeah,
Hmm.
they were chilling out there. They rowed out, and then they kind of like circled around us, and then they were kind of hanging around the area, and kind of watching us, making sure that that one guy. Now the rest of us we could fish. The one guy who didn't pay the money, he was not allowed to fish. How dare he?
I'm just trying to think of how much money was wasted just having the cops, like how much the state paid to have cops sitting out there staring at you.
Well, my dad got me the license, so I don't know. But I do know, like, for example, uh, I remember when I was working at my work and a few cops came in and they were making sure that the person in our alcohol department had the alcohol license. And all you do for the alcohol license is that you pay money for to have the license in order to sell alcohol, and that's like $400.
Oh,
That's
Well,
jeez.
more extortion.
isn't aren't alcohol licenses like really weird the way that they work, at least, like, because I remember in my I think it was like sophomore year in my law class, I was told that like there's a limited number of alcohol licenses that exist, and like
Yes.
people who have them will sell them to other people. Like you can sell it to other people.
I would assume that would be the case since it would be a scarce resource, but yes, the alcohol license is limited. It reminds me of one of these eye-opening passages in The Ethics of Liberty by Rothbard, where he talks about a form of corruption, a form of government corruption that is actually good. And when I first was hearing about this when I was reading it, I was like, go on, I'm curious. How can government corruption be good? And Rothbard was like, it's based to pay off and bribe cops to get a better deal in order to avoid these regulations, such as a corrupt cop coming in to our establishment and saying, "Hey, I won't check your $400 alcohol license if you just pay me $40 off, and we'll be cool." Which obviously is still shitty for the cop, but it's a better deal for the alcohol seller, and that is good, and we should praise
Well,
that.
still sounds like extortion.
It's still
Yeah.
extortion, but the point is
Just
that
take
what
the
Rothbard was
middleman
giving
out.
was the point that Rothbard was bringing up was that not all forms of corruption are bad. This form of corruption does bring about um, a better world, you could say, by with less money being extorted.
Yeah, like the way
I
it's
don't know.
commonly the way it's commonly
I don't know.
painted, where like it's like, oh yeah, people big companies lobby for deregulation, and that's why capitalism is so evil. Like it would be a good thing if they were lobbying for deregulation, because then they're just spending money to try and reduce the amount of state interference, but that's not what they're doing. They're doing the opposite.
Yeah, more often or not, lobbying is usually lobbying for more regulation. And when the and usually the lobbying groups behind mega corporations are almost always lobbying for more regulations, such as um recently a few months ago. I don't know if I already mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'll say it again. Um, Minimum wage here for fast food in California raised to $20 an hour for only fast food, except for one fast food chain, Panera Bread. And gets you thinking, probably Panera Bread lobbied the California government to be exempt from this regulation so that their competitors have to pay more for labor, but Panera Bread don't.
What's like the
Mm.
official justification of that? Like, is it like, oh, they have this certain policy, meaning that they don't have to, or what? What's the?
I don't know. I don't think they even attempted
Is
the
it like
establishment here in
explicitly in the
California.
law?
Never even, no, it's just actually, no, they're just never talked about. Because all on the
No,
news, it was
Justin.
that we were raising the minimum wage to $20 an hour for
Mm-hmm.
fast food workers. And, you just have to dig for yourself to find out, except Panera Bread was exempt. Because they couldn't even make up an argument for it. So
Maybe
they
they
just hid it.
were. They like classed it as non-fast food.
Yeah, that
Sure.
Well,
actually makes
I mean,
sense
even their
because
their
with Panera Bread, it would be
classifications.
easy, right? They could just be like, oh yeah, technically they don't do fast food service. We do a different type of service where maybe some sort of like hybrid restaurant thing. So the way that we go about actually delivering the product is somehow by some technicality different enough where they don't have to deal with the minimum wage being $20.
Yeah, they could have, or maybe they did do that, but I would not know. But yeah.
Yeah. Or
Man,
or
that's
maybe they
crazy.
have like a tip jar or something. Like, oh, you're getting tips. You don't
I'm,
have to raise the minimum wage.
I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword, I would say. Even if, like, as we obviously agree, lobbying for more regulation is horrible. It's a double-edged sword also because if they're lobbying, if deregulatory policies are in place, then as I've explained multiple times on this show, it negative effects contrary to what libertarians are striving for will still occur.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it's just it's just meant to present how even even if they were going for deregulatory policies, then it would not be favorable ideal.
Yeah, because
Sure, because like let's say that they deregulate for one particular company like Panera or something, it just makes them stronger in the market and inflates their value in the market because now they don't have to
yeah,
deal with competition, fair competition. And then you have a lot of people saying, "See, I told you so. I told you that capitalism was bad." So it becomes sort of like a PR thing too. Like, how do you even, as an ANCAP, how are you sort of separating those two things and able to say, no, 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 this is not what we actually want. This is a distortion in the market.
And this
And
reminds
it's
me of
I
the
mean,
difficult.
Freetown Project. If you guys remember the Freetown Project in New Hampshire,
I think I
Oh, what was the
remember
name of the
yeah.
town?
reading about
it
it.
started with the G.
Was it
I
Grafton or something?
remember
Something like
Yeah,
that?
I think it was Grafton.
I remember when I first like became a libertarian. I think that's what was brought up by like a friend of mine. Like, oh yeah, libertarians tried making like their own community in New Hampshire, and it failed because like bears or whatever.
Bears.
One of the examples that happened in Grafton, New Hampshire, was the trash problem. It was like something about deregulating parts of the city, um, that there was no one to collect the trash, but there were still regulations up to prevent private businesses to start a garbage business. So
Mm.
you got rid of the public garbage business, and you couldn't implement a private garbage business. So everyone's trash was just overfilling. And I mean, I don't have any sources. I'm going off on memory, so I don't know if what I'm saying is exactly accurate, but it goes to show that you can deregulate one thing, and because of other regulations that exist, the deregulation causes the other regulations to cause another issue that, well, on a surface level, could have not been foreseen.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's it's like if you were to just completely get rid of um you know oh fuck, I had a good example and then I forgot about someone else saved me.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of like when people talk about gradualism, they think, for instance, like with the trash problem, let's just say like you completely you don't pay for the trash anymore as the town, right? Let's just say that for instance. And now there's a bunch of different trash companies that are not hired by the town, by the public officials anymore because the public officials don't have the power to do it. Now the question becomes, okay, there's going to be a shock from that for at least a little while where the trash problem gets so bad that now bears will travel into your town. So like um I think one of the things about like the gradualist position, right, is say give them time for deregulation so that as they wane off of it, you're able to have these companies come in to take over the roles. But of course, there are problems with that situation too, so it really becomes sort of a pickle. It seems like the shock treatment is the best way to go about it. Literally, just get rid of as much as you can, and even though it's going to cause its own problems, those problems will be fixed and moderated eventually by the market.
Yeah. It's like you can compare it a lot to the business cycle where like the lack of, voluntary fulfillment of these, wants and needs is it like it would be an immediate problem to get rid of those services that are currently provided by the government. But then if you were to gradually do it, you face a whole bunch of other problems. Um, just like if you were to try and like do a soft landing when you have a huge boom in the economy. If you were to be if you try and do a soft landing like the Fed tries to do, well, you're not
Mhm.
actually going to burst the bubble. You're not actually going to have a stable economy now. You're still operating with a completely um, I guess in like mainstream economic terms overheated market.
And it goes kind
Yeah.
of reminds me, it goes back to my day out on the ocean. My friend who had the expired license, he was explaining to me that he wasn't in favor of much regulations at all, but he did, understand the importance of, not overfishing, and he did appreciate some fishing game regulations to prevent overfishing. And it's I mean, I completely agree. No one wants to be overfishing, especially if you're a fisherman and you don't want to face the tragedy of the commons out on the ocean, and for next year there's nothing for you to have because overfishing happened. And um so even though it's hard to conceptualize fixing the tragedy of the commons on the ocean, I thought Rothbard in his book For a New Liberty, I believe, had interesting ideas about how we could properly privatize the ocean in order to avoid the tragedy of the commons. And for anyone listening who don't know what the tragedy of the commons are. It's when a common area, that meaning an area that is not privately owned, and people are trying to extract resources from it, such as fish on the ocean. Since no one individually owns the area, there is a lack of an incentive to preserve it, because if you try to preserve this plot of what land or ocean that has natural resources to it, if you try to preserve it by not trying to take too much from it, you cannot trust the next guy right next to you who is also allowed to use the ocean or the land to exploit the land and deplete it so that it cannot be used for the future. So incentivize everyone to take as much as they can first, because no one can trust the other person to preserve the natural resources so that they can replenish. So how you solve the tragedy of the commons is to privatize it, so that no one else is allowed to exploit your land, so that you can have the incentive to cultivate it and replenish it. And yeah, and so like completely understand that, it's hard to conceptualize how it could be done to the ocean, but at the end of the day, tragedy of the commons or not, ocean that is privatized or not, it's still not right for the game warden to come up to you and tell you that no, you can't catch this fish. You can only have a certain amount of fish per day, and it can't be that fish, because the warden has no authority to tell you what you can or cannot fish, because he doesn't own the fish. He doesn't own the ocean.
Yeah, and it becomes sticky too because with how it works with states is, I guess, the United Nations at some point, along their 80-year reign of terror, they decided that it would be wise to come up with some sort of rules for how, for example, how much of the water off the coast of a country that country owns. So I don't remember. It's like 15 miles or some
I think it's
some
It's
crazy
12.
number
12,
like that, right?
and recently
Is it
the
12?
U.S. actually just acquired new water territory. They convinced the UN to acquire more water territory off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, a little bit off the west coast, a big chunk off Alaska, and a little bit in the Gulf of Mexico. So they got new.
No, that's
We got
great.
some new water territory, boys. Go USA.
Hell yeah.
USA,
Um,
USA.
and then with that I guess you would call it de facto property right now over that land, they're able to enforce what they want in that land, which is, I believe, why when you have like a casino, like a floating casino, like a boat casino, they have to go out like at least 12 miles away from the coast so that you can,
Or
gamble.
gambling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, stuff
So
like
you
that's really
can.
interesting because then in international waters, there's other legislation, but it's a lot more lenient because again, it's like it might as well be anarchy at that point because it's not like
Yeah.
people are actually enforcing the international water laws unless you just happen to come across a bully in a ship that stops you.
Yeah.
Now I kind of want to talk about the seasteading project.
I
We're very boat
barely
themed
know
episode
anything
so
about it.
far. Very much about the ocean today, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the seasteading project? I know,
The
Gamer, you just
only
said you don't know much
Yeah,
about
the
it,
only
but
really thing I know about like the concept of seasteading is I watched a video on what's his name? Um he ran for president in 2016. And then he committed John McAfee.
Oh yeah.
That's like the only thing I know about it.
that
I'm trying
John
to
McAfee
remember.
was
I'm
he was a
aware. I'm aware
seasteader?
that.
He was really into it. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
I
well,
mean,
yeah, because he was
I
like
mean,
on the run from the U.S. government, so he was just, so he just lived on a boat for a very long time.
But that's not the same as seasteading.
Okay,
You
then
see,
I
the
mean, I'm
concept of
aware
I
of.
think I
seasteading,
don't know what seasteading is then.
I mean,
the concept
I
of
know the
seasteading is
organization.
basically making a permanent settlement in the middle of the ocean. Instead of a boat, it's literally a permanent fixed location, a settlement, like an
Hmm.
oil rig, but it's sustainable as like a neighborhood or a town on the ocean.
Hmm.
Like Metal Gear Solid 5
Like,
when
yeah,
they're
exactly.
on their oil
So
rig platform. I
so
forgot the name.
Cat Boss, I never played
Pretty
Metal
much.
Gear Solid 5, but I know there's like the boss man.
They are like a mercenary group.
The only thing that I've heard about like this is I think it's in the North Sea. I think it's Sealand that was like trying to
Yes,
like be recognized as
in
a
Britain.
country. Like all
Mhm.
between like the Britain and the Netherlands.
Yeah, I heard about that too. Like the oil rig that was like abandoned, and someone decided to set up shop there, and
Mhm.
then create like a micronation.
Yeah. And then the
No,
UN
there
like wouldn't
was, I think,
recognize them.
David Friedman's son. I forget his name.
Patrick Friedman.
Yeah, Patrick, something like that. I
I
think
think it's
Friedman
Patrick.
3.
Friedman 3, we'll call him.
Yeah,
Friedman
Friedman
3 has
3,
dropped.
Friedman 3 has dropped. He is big into the seasteading stuff. I know that much.
I mean, he's the one who founded the Seasteading Institute.
That would make sense. That would be exactly why he would be so big into it. Yeah.
Oh no, you're right. It is Patry.
Yeah. Weird name,
Um,
Petri.
Yeah. What was David thinking?
I don't know if he was thinking. Have you read his books? Are you sure he was thinking?
I have not
read
read
The
his
Machinery of
books.
Freedom. It was
I have
a
it. I haven't
pretty
read it.
incoherent mess.
I
I
read
skimmed
like
it.
I've read like some of his articles and stuff because I was doing research on Iceland for like a project a few years ago. But other than that, I have not.
I mean, I've read his take on Georgism, um, and I watched quite a few interviews. But
Out of
I've
interest, what
watched.
is his take on Georgism?
well, he basically believes that a land value tax, a risk of it is that it could allow for monopolies to emerge. Let me see if I
That
can read.
requires I think that requires a bunch of asterisks though, because like Rothbard's chapter in Man Economy State on monopolies is like one of the best chapters ever written, probably on the
Mhm.
subject. And like Rothbard completely destroys the concept of monopolies pretty much wholeheartedly in that. And like
Yeah.
you could make the argument that owning a piece of property absolutely is a monopoly over that property, over that bit of land. You could make the argument that, having a certain skill set, like Rothbard says, is also monopolizing on your specific skill set, the services of, Schizoid, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I have a unique set of skills.
No one else can replicate what you do, Schizoid.
Nah. Do you guys know how to fly a plane? I didn't think so.
That I
Schizoid
do
is
not know
the
how to
only
do.
person
I
able
have
to
a
fly a plane
monopoly.
ever.
I have a monopoly on flying single engine planes as an anarchist philosophy theorist.
There has to be at
You
least
know,
one other.
oh, there
Find
has to
me
be.
one. Break
They're
my
not a real
monopoly.
anarchist.
You're not a real anarchist
Not
until you
real.
start flying a small single engine airplane.
Oh,
as an
there's a
aircraft.
topic to talk about. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I use Twitter like a sadist, right? Or a masochist, or whichever one is the one where you get hurt. And
Masochist, yeah.
uh, masochist. And let me just say, it's maybe the least friendly place to ever try to have a conversation, and part of it has to do with the UI. It's just so poorly designed for having any sort of in-depth conversation on anything.
Because you're limited in your text. It's like TikTok.
Yeah,
It's like having a debate in a TikTok comment section where you only get like 3 sentences to say what you want to
yeah.
say.
Well, that's the thing though,
You
is
have
because
to be provocative.
yes, it's designed literally to be as provocative as possible. And so what it does is it encourages quick owns. It's like an own culture thing that develops off of just the format that X or Twitter has. And that's something that is like built into its DNA. It's a hot take generator. And so the problem with that is that it completely destroys all meaningful like nuance or conversation that could possibly happen on that platform. Like, okay, I was talking to a friend who uses Reddit a lot, right? And he was like, "Yeah, Reddit sucks. It's like the worst." And I said, "I think Twitter is absolutely 100% worse because you take the people from Reddit who have their terrible, awful, shitty opinions, And imagine if you turn that up to 11 because they can only type like not even a paragraph worth of information. And then the way you have to navigate it is by looking through threads and trying to figure out where the branches diverge and all these other things just to keep up with the conversation. The quotes aren't like none of it works functionally. I mean, it works because people use it a lot, but like none of it is at all ergonomic by any stretch of the imagination. The reason I mentioned Twitter is I have noticed, and this is maybe part of my problem. I'm one of those people who likes to play around with the idea of like anarchist unity, even though I don't know if it's possible. I like to be like friendly with other flags, other stripes of anarchism. So I'll be on Twitter and I'll be like under the replies of people who are, different types of anarchists, usually like mutualists, people who are a little bit more accepting of ANCAPs generally.
The
Um,
market anarchists.
the market anarchists, right? The left-wing market anarchist, which is just, a great title. But the point
It's
is,
like that one meme. What's that one meme where it was like, are you guys friends? And then one guy's like, yes, and the market anarchist is like, no.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, it seems with the market anarchists, it depends who they're talking to at the time. If they're talking to an ANCAP, they'll be like, oh yeah, we're best friends. And then they'll immediately turn their back when an ANCOM comes by and says, I hate this guy with all of my guts.
Yeah.
Anyway, the the point of this long tirade is that I've noticed there is a tendency, and this is not something that started on Twitter, but it is a tendency that has continued on Twitter, and I think is perpetuated by Twitter's hot take culture. And I believe that that is the dominance of a lot of anarchists of different stripes calling ANCAPs not real anarchists, and then not elaborating whatsoever, and then just not actually giving any sort of real criticism of the ideology, and then just like moving on and doing whatever else with their life. Like, it's just this thing like, you're not a real anarchist. And then I ask why. And then they say, okay, keep stealing people's labor or whatever. And it's like, okay, this is not an actual conversation. This is just an attempt for you to try to like exclude, which is funny, by the way, that non-property anarchists are trying to exclude, but really hilarious. And
Exclude the
yeah, it
ideas.
just exactly. And so I don't know. That's just something that irks me a lot, and I wanted to bring that up because, again, I use Twitter, and it's a cesspool.
A
Absolutely. it
Randian would
is.
say that an anarchist has the intellectual property right in anarchism, and they have the right to exclude you from the idea.
Real.
Right. Totally real, dude. So
See,
real.
I think it's a valid criticism of like, oh yeah, like capitalism and anarchism are like opposed to one another. They just think it for the wrong reasons, right? Because the whole like like no like when people say capitalism, they are referring to, laissez-faire. You have a government and it's just there to like enforce property rights or like maybe break up monopolies every once in a while. Um, but then because it's actually really funny because sometimes people will point to antitrust regulation as being like pro capitalism. So like it's a
Yeah.
valid point to be like, oh yeah, capitalism and anarchism are not to be associated with one another. But then it's like, oh well, it's because like they're not attacking the capitalism part, they're attacking the free market part, which is necessary within anarchism because anarchism without a free market is not anarchism. You have to have freedom to trade if you are to be an anarchist.
Hmm.
Exactly. If you
Reminds
deny
me
that,
of that.
you might as well deny everything else, right? Like, you
Yeah,
can't do whatever
I,
you choose to do.
I
That
would
seems
say
like it
just
would be a problem.
my sort of criticism typically, my criticisms I direct towards the sort of ANCAP movement are typically just on the level that they're thin libertarians, and I just usually associate them with that. But there are a lot of arguments.
And James, explain what you
With
mean by thin libertarian.
thin libertarian. I think we did this
They
before
need to
in
eat
the
some
podcast.
food.
They, okay, to simplify, I
Anorexic
suppose.
libertarian.
There's a
Anorexic.
distinction between thin and thick libertarians. Where thin libertarians, they tend to sort of look at the system of fiat property, and view it as almost reflective of a free society. So basically, maybe just a nice way to explain this is you think of this sort of meme idea of capitalism, and the thin libertarian will just look at that and they'll go, based, like, um,
Throwing
yeah,
communists
yeah,
off of
corporate
helicopters.
industries. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like throwing. They're often very politicized to where they'll cheer for state policies that like you said, throwing communists out of helicopters, unleashing the cops and whatnot. Um, Whereas the thin
Deporting
libertarian
people.
will just look at the whole system of fiat property and say, hey, let's just look at how this influences the market. Okay, let's look at how what people tend to associate, what people tend to call capitalism. Let's just look at how this is really affecting the market economy. And they start to investigate further, and maybe sweatshops, where the thin libertarian tries to defend, because they think that it's um, that it would something like such as that would be common in a free society, but the thick libertarian will sort of analyze mechanisms such as intellectual property and whatnot, which actually I think Kevin Carson has a really good article about it. Actually, it was pre 2010 Kevin Carson, I think. I'd
Before he
have to
drank the
find it,
mercury.
but yeah, before you drink the mercury. But
What?
Yeah, I'm gonna need context on that.
The
Either
joke is that
after the
Kevin
episode.
Carson. The joke is that Kevin Carson is like the left libertarian equivalent of Papa. Like he
Well, no,
goes off the
I know.
rails.
I've heard of things like, didn't he say once, or was this Gary Xavier? I can't remember. One of the two said that they advocated for beheading uh TV broadcasters.
well, that's a very Kevin Carson take.
That does
What?
sound like a Kevin Carson take.
I
Kevin
think
I mean,
Carson.
NCAT told me that.
yeah, yeah, because he was
Kevin.
showing us the book he has from Kevin Carson. And on the back has
Like,
all the quotes of
Oh yes, yes. It has
Scott.
like I
three
would
separate Kinsella
understand.
quotes,
I would
three
understand.
separate block quotes.
I would understand wanting to behead like Rachel Maddow, but like exclusively to TV commentators.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean
just trying to.
Kevin Carson.
Yeah.
He
You
basically
gotta have to
suffers
find that quote
from.
because I'm just saying shit out of thin air.
Yeah, the
I mean,
Mercury
Kevin
joke is just
Carson.
that he went crazy. He like fell off the deep end.
He suffers the same issues as Hans Hermann Hoppe, but just
But
the
it's
way in
funny
which
because they're both Marxists.
True.
real on a
True.
methodological level. Yeah. Well, I mean, Kevin Carson isn't a Marxist though. He does have a really weird thing where he tries
Boner.
to mix the labor
He's
theory
a
of
weird
value.
boner from Marx.
Dude, his
He
labor,
has that
his
too.
like
He has that
neo-labor
too.
theory thing
I was gonna
makes
mention,
no
yeah.
sense.
What?
Oh,
It makes no sense. He
I
tries to
know.
like create an Austrian labor theory, and it's bizarre and it's just subjective theory but dressed up slightly differently. And I tried to read about it, like read his article on it, and I was just like, I don't understand this. So then I go to Bob Murphy's like rebuttal of it, and I still don't really understand it because my econ is really weak. But either way, I still found it to be like completely inscrutable, honestly.
The issue, the issue of Kevin, the biggest issue with him is that he just doesn't really, he's not much of an Austrian, really, which is unfortunate. But because actually, I do
Yeah,
think he has a lot of good articles. I've read quite a few of them, and like the one I just mentioned earlier, it's it's definitely, I definitely recommend them. But just look besides his a lot of his crazy takes, like for example, like Studies in Mutualist Political Economy. Is not a bad book. Organization Theory. That's actually I might even recommend that actually. But
yeah. If he's an Austrian, then I'm 6'6" and a black man.
Stratino?
That's right. Hi, everybody. It's me, Stratino. I'm dressing up pretending to be Shayne, but I'm actually Stratino. Hi,
No
everybody. I
way.
fooled you. Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I do want to check out Kevin Carson just because, like, I like to have that wide breadth of influences. I'd like to be able to see exactly what left libertarians or like left-wing market anarchists are sort of getting themselves up to, because I'm not opposed to a lot of what they say.
I've
It's just
audiobooked a huge chunk of Markets Not Capitalism. I thought it had I didn't agree with everything it said, but I thought it had a lot of good things to say that I think ANCAPs need to hear.
I've been reading it, yeah.
Definitely.
I found some of it to be pretty, what's the word? Um,
Kevin Carson takes. There's
I,
a couple Kevin
uh,
Carson takes levels in there, like, a little few iffy things, a little few iffy like mutualist tendencies in there where like chill out. But
there's a
overall I thought
couple
it
of
was okay.
times it comes off as very preachy, or like it's trying to like what is it? Split hairs. That's what it feels like a lot of the time. That it's trying to split hairs and say, oh well, yeah, technically that's okay, but that's not really what we want culturally. That's bad. Don't act like that. And I have a hard time sort of combining those sensibilities with what I think, which is sort of maybe a cultural social liberalism more generally for mine, because they're very socially progressive, and a lot of like ANCAPs are socially conservative, and I would consider myself kind of like socially liberal. I don't really care if people are conservative or progressive in their own communities, but
I think I just kind of reject that paradigm. When you think
yeah,
about
Yeah, I
when you think
agree.
about things from a rational egoist perspective on
Real.
morality, you kind of realize that since this form of morality, rational egoism, is not held by a lot of people in society and hasn't been around for very long, it's hard to find any sort of what's the word? Relatability with current progressive tendencies towards one way in society in a moralistic sense, how society should be moralistically from a progressive perspective, and how society should be moralistically in a conservative direction or a traditionalist direction. I just can't relate with either because either is just cut from the same branch of altruism.
well, and they're
I mean, I
reactive
just
to
think
each other
that
too.
I just think that there's an issue with how the culture war frames culture. Um, it's as if it's something that's sort of a structural and top-down phenomena,
Yeah,
which I would oppose in favor of a more praxeological take culture,
right. Yeah,
which would
definitely.
which would undermine the whole paradigm.
Hmm.
Yeah, but because if you start with thinking that culture is some large monolith and go like turtles all the way down with to the individual from there, you have that sort of what's the term, like analyzing multiple different like overlaps in cultures, and you have the problem of defining culture. It's much more efficacious and true to humanity to start with the praxeological sense that culture is this thing that that emerges from interacting with each other and trying to basically build a social lubricant in order to make dealings with each other easier. And when
The
you think
Yeah,
about it like that,
individual.
like
and the
lowering
state
the cost of interactions with others is basically what culture is, right?
The
but the state sort of acts to subvert individuals' abilities to even do that, so they can't coordinate themselves.
I
Well,
find
and the
it.
state also has to, I'm sorry, one second. The state also has to create an identity in order to keep themselves together. And by doing that, they're able to take cultures that already exist, that have already emerged, and claim them as their own in order to sort of co opt them and then be able to justify themselves post hoc.
I find it really interesting how a lot of like statists, when you really start to push them. Like I was arguing with someone I've known for a very long time earlier today, and I like your replied to something he said, which was something along the lines of, "Oh, the problem with the status quo is that you don't have people that are educated and smart. You know, the culture is like too brain rotted, so they're not able to like, actually participate in like democracy, and so um you have too much power in the hands of the state, and that's why there's no liberty today, and that's why we live under an oppressive system. And it's just really funny because it's you're attributing you're pretending as if culture is something that one can be mended, because he was talking about this like within a conversation about like sort of, you know, getting to a free society, um or what he would consider a free society, which is, you know, just a constitutional democracy or whatever. Um, and so he was saying this as if like, oh yeah, so what you need to do is you need to shape the culture. And I pressed him on this, and he's like, oh well, so what you would need, and then I brought up something about like, oh well, propaganda is gonna exist as long as there's a state, and he mentioned like, oh well, then you just teach every kid to like be able to discern what is and isn't propaganda, and it's just kind of shocking how sort of uh I guess blue pilled you can be, where it's just, oh yeah, this, we can just do this and it would fix everything, because then, you know, we can just shape the culture. And it comes out of like the conservative idea of like, oh, we're gonna shape the culture and that's gonna shape politics.
Yeah, the
um
point of effective propaganda, at least good propaganda, is that average normal people cannot avoid its effects.
mhm.
So it's kind of like you're just kind of like asking normal people to be like super skilled in that, which it goes
Yeah.
against the whole idea of the division of labor. Normal people are normal because whatever every individual specializes in that makes their aspect, their character, not normal in, you know, their specialized way, is that everything else is not focused enough to be in their special craft that they participate in the division of labor, and whatever skills that they participate in, hobbies, or their particular attributes. That not everyone can be a super awesome person to discern propaganda, and that's why we have the term normal people. So normally this is not going to work out, and it's a pipe dream, like you just said. It's completely blue pilled.
And this is also what
Yeah,
I was
and
saying it's a
Oh, wait,
complete
yeah, we should let
waste
James
of.
speak on this because he's kind of the Illusion
Well,
here.
I just want to
Oh,
say what I was gonna say is it is like a complete waste of time to spend all of this time, you know, learning about politics, and most people agree with me, right? Which is why, you know, all of these like political systems, which originally were supposed to be like voted on and stuff, and like, oh well, your elected legislators do all of this. It was delegated to bureaucracy because people don't actually care, because politics is a waste of time in the end. Like, not only is it a system of violence, it's also a waste of time.
yeah, I mean, as leaning into what you two were discussing with propaganda, being able to discern propaganda from not propaganda, there's often many confusions around that. Like some people have this sort of misperception that propaganda is occurs more directly. So, for example, um, these these influencers, these political commentators, they must be Russian agents or something like such as that. Um, in order for it to be propaganda, or maybe what someone's saying has to be untrue in order for it to be propaganda. When no, those aren't necessary components of propaganda. And it's when you take that into consideration, about how something can both be, you know, true and influenced indirectly, how it can still propagate people into forming actions that benefit the state. You you sort of you really think about your ability to even discern that sort of stuff. And another thing, leaning back into democracy. I do say this on multiple occasions where I just say democracy is a myth because it really is. The idea that somehow we're able to sort of ideologically maneuver the state is I don't think I think it's flawed in multiple respects, and so does Jacques Ellul, um which I would definitely recommend his books. I suppose he even wrote a book on propaganda. Just just call it propaganda.
Apt
Which I
title.
would.
To the point.
What?
I said
The
apt title.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I was going on with is how the state, it's acting to maximize its own efficiency, to as it's fundamentally a bureaucracy. It lacks morals in the sense it doesn't. I, I don't think that they, for example, I give this example multiple times, but it's really good, especially when you're speaking to libertarians. Deregulatory policies. We are familiar with phenomena such as the Laffer curve and and whatnot that ultimately
We know
do
what the Laffer curve is, but James, would you care to explain the Laffer curve?
um yes, so the basic gist behind the Laffer curve is that once taxation it is just sort of when it decreases productivity generally goes up and more wealth is created within the economy. That's the basic
Basically, how I interpret the Laffer curve is that there's a certain what's the term?
threshold.
There's a certain marginal or maximum efficiency point where the taxation rate is not so much where it decreases productivity too much, but not so little that you're not reaping enough that you could have, where you reach this middle ground where it's perfect, and so you reach the perfect point of productivity and expropriation, and that would be represented as a tax percentage that would be ideal for a state to employ.
Yep. I mean, what I'm just going at is this also ties into the thick libertarian approach where we actually sort of analyze the state's processes and whatnot, and how it affect and how its system of fiat property it they operate the relationship, okay, between them. It's very important to observe and actually understand. Mm, It's so I suppose that's really all I wanted to get at.
Thank you, James.
Anytime.
So yeah, I think coming back to basically what we were saying is like the I don't know, like it feels like the propaganda machine that we're seeing now is definitely going a certain way, and it's becoming harder to recognize when something is and isn't propaganda. For example, I don't know if you guys have ever actually there was a thing recently that it reminded me of a tweet that I sent out a while ago, but there was a tweet that LP Colorado sent out that had to
Is
do
that
with
Oh
saying
yeah,
the
I know what you're.
copper
Ukraine
Yeah.
copper guy?
No, Kaufman is New Hampshire.
no,
Okay. No,
copper
he's from Arizona. Never mind.
Arizona, you're thinking of Austrians or whatever, Copper State Austrians. I'm thinking of LP Colorado. Um, they said they posted something recently that was like, remember Russia didn't start the fight. Ukraine was the one who goaded them into doing it. Something like that along those lines. And
Yeah.
well, first of all, obviously the idea of dehumanizing I get not dehumanizing but rather anthropomorphizing the state was something that I mentioned in a tweet. I was just like, it's not helpful to make foreign affairs into basically like two sovereign individuals, Russia and Ukraine, like having a spat or something. It's individuals that are playing on this like cultural social monolith that was invented, right? But more than that, like I remember what that reminded me of that tweet was I remember tweeting something probably about 6 months ago now, maybe a little longer ago, um, where it was something like a Ukrainian, like a 14-year-old Ukrainian boy on Twitter was getting really riled up because it was just like, if you're Russian, don't engage with me on Twitter. It's an immediate block. That's disgusting. Something like that. And what I realized was these people, like, I basically wrote this. I was like, it's really not a healthy sign when you're seeing people dehumanize those who just happen to have been born in a different location than them and fully integrate that into not only their identity, but how they interact with other people and how they see other people. And me pointing that out on Twitter was enough to get a bunch of Ukrainians and pro-Ukraine supporters to basically, start bombing my replies and saying whatever they wanted to say about how I was some sort of Russian, uh, you know, bot or spy, or I was, working with the Russians or something of that nature. And and every time I tried to humanize the child, you see this also with the Akels of the world and the Project Liberals, but like dehumanizing an enemy, like the enemy, quote unquote enemy, and trying to say like, oh, what about that Japanese baby? What about that baby in Siberia? Do you think that those babies should be killed? And it's like, yes, they'll just grow up and become exactly the thing that we're fighting. And it's like, it's so separated from the reality of how I think libertarians view the situation as individuals being enslaved by a group above them who are also composed of individuals. Instead, it's creating these abstractions that are useful to the state, but end up being incredibly detrimental in the long run.
Racism is the lowest form of collectivism.
And then I
Yeah.
also, with like the specific tweet, because it was something along the lines of like, oh yeah, Ukraine provoked Russia. Assuming they mean by Ukraine, they don't mean the area and people of Ukraine. They mean, the Republic of Ukraine, and by Russia they mean the Russian Federation. That's still wrong because it was the United States which provoked Russia into invading Ukraine, not the Republic of Ukraine, which had provoked the Russian Federation into invading Ukraine. So even then,
Right. Well,
they're still wrong on like that point.
it becomes tag, right? It becomes putting the blame on somebody, not because, and this is something that, LPNH has been famous for, is putting the blame on some group or some person as a means of lifting off the responsibility of individuals for doing the same thing. And that's really, I think, ultimately what sort of that racist and like ethnic nationalist thought comes down to is how can we position ourselves as a culture above an individual, above individuals generally? How can we separate ourselves and that story that is not convenient because it's way too hard to explain and make it into something that's much easier to explain? And okay, and then here's the other thing, right? Even if it's the case that I don't really understand the point of the tweet also for the LPCO thing, because even if it is the case that okay, Ukraine was the one that provoked Russia, or I'm sorry, the people in the government of Ukraine provoked the people of the government of Russia, it wouldn't matter, one, unless unless there was some sort of aggression that occurred first, that the provocation was justified. But second, it wouldn't matter because the American government shouldn't be sending funds and money to Ukraine or Russia or whoever either way, right? It doesn't change the fact of the matter. It wouldn't matter who started a fight. It doesn't mean that you should get involved in the fight. So I don't really understand the point of it except to get on people's nerves and to cause controversy to stir the pot a little bit. And I just don't find that sort of engagement very long lasting or effective.
I agree.
And I think it's true of LPNH too. Just pointed that out there. I think it's very myopic, and yeah.
Funny,
That's about all.
as libertarians, sometimes, a lot of times, and you can definitely include the Randians into this mistake that they commit as well. They often forget methodological individualism.
Speaking of methodological individualism, Schizoid, if one wanted to learn more about methodological individualism, where could they find that out?
Wow, that's
They can
crazy.
find it out
I
on
wish
my
I
most
had an
recent
audiobook.
video that I uploaded on my channel called Individualism and the Philosophy of the Social Sciences, which was a primer from Murray Rothbard, a reprint of two older essays from the 60s that he made it into a primer in the 70s, and he made it into a short little book, and I made an audio book with AI, and I posted it on my YouTube channel called the_schizoid_man. Thank you
What's
for
Schizoid?
thank you for
And then
yeah,
you can
James.
see you can see how Nesians are refuted.
Yeah,
But-
the
but-
Nesians. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, what?
Okay, so in the audiobook, because it's AI, so there's a few mistakes here and there. The AI generated Keynesianism as like Keynesianism.
It's
Oh.
incredible. But Schizoid, I'm a cuck. I'm a saltwater Austrian. I don't like Rothbard. Why should I listen to it?
Because you should like Rothbard, and then you
Because
should
there's a
listen to it.
forward. There's a
Oh,
forward. If only there were a forward by Hayek or something.
Right, because well, don't you worry, you silly little goober, you little butthole. It's got a foreword by the F.A. Hayek. He's from like in his very old age of like 90 something probably by this time because this was made in the 70s. It's got a foreword by F.A. Hayek, your favorite. You stupid
Yay!
John
Now
Equal.
Now I can watch Roquan fuck my girlfriend. Yay!
Yay!
Lovely.
Also,
Dude, Shayne, awesome goat plug.
yeah.
You're welcome.
I mean,
Wow.
on that note, we're nearing an hour. If you guys want to, wrap up this episode.
Yeah.
How about we wrap it up with I don't know. Let's go around and share our thoughts and our feelings.
And
We
if
share
you
our
guys
feelings.
want
Play
to
some
see,
spin the bottle.
We caught
you
one
guys, if you guys want to see the relationship between Wittgenstein and Austrian economics, no, that wasn't.
No one wants to. No, just
Is that
kidding.
coming
James.
out?
It's a good video. It's a really good video.
When's it
Oh,
drop?
it's already
Like,
out.
Yeah, it was like 4 weeks ago.
Shayne, you need to get
Oh.
on it.
I got to
Yeah,
get up
you-
to date with my YouTube content creators. Now, James, where could I find that video if I wanted to see that video?
You could find it
He's doing my
at
job
James
for me.
Deliberated, no space, on YouTube right there. I have the dog profile, with the sort of with the synthwave background, a little bit of an ANCAP flag in there. That's me.
Beautiful.
And James,
Absolutely
if I
beautiful.
wanted to find the other platforms you're on, where could I find those?
You can find me at Liberty James on Twitter or X if you're gay.
Um,
What did he mean by this?
and
No, that I didn't mean. Okay, that could be misinterpreted. I meant if you call it X, then
Oh,
And-
we didn't speak about Zuckerberg at all. That's crazy.
Oh,
All right,
yeah,
Zuckerberg said he
oh,
was a
yeah.
libertarian.
yeah,
We'll make this really
Zuckerberg-
quick.
He did?
Yeah, he did.
He didn't say it publicly, but people who know him, insiders, his friends, his family, I don't know who.
Did we
They
I
basically-
think
Bill
it's like his
Zuckerberg?
media team.
His
Did
media,
we
something like that.
Bill- Yo, Zuckerberg started like read Anatomy of the State and was like, oh
No,
shit.
so
feel
what
like- I
happened
feel like-
was, so there was like a press release from him that was like, oh yeah, Zuckerberg is trying to like mend his relations with like the right wingers, and he identifies as a libertarian now, which
Bruh, he probably read Democracy the God That Failed.
no, we can safely assume that by libertarian he means conservative leaning, but not conservative. Like
He probably thinks like the same kind of libertarian like that Donald Trump was thinking of when he called himself a libertarian. The greatest libertarian
the-
to have ever
Greatest.
lived.
if I
I don't
wasn't a
even know.
libertarian before, I certainly am now.
That's like
That
the
was
funny
so
thing
bad.
is,
Nominate
People-
me for the Libertarian Party. Whoa, okay. Only if you want to lose. You want to keep your 3% of votes? Only if you want to lose.
yes, he really did say that, didn't he? Here's the
Yeah,
thing, right?
Mark Zuckerberg is not a libertarian. Let's just make that
Zuckerberg-
clear.
What? No!
There is this weird.
Wait, what?
I don't know how to describe it. There is a crazy amount of people of libertarians on Twitter who are up in arms about this, man. They are so angry that Zuckerberg calls himself a libertarian, and it's like, dude, this is the thing though. 10% of the United States self-identifies as a libertarian with a little L, right? So they're not like Libertarian Party, but 10% of the American population. What libertarian means to like the average person, we have this weird misconception that like libertarianism, everybody knows what the NAP is and they just like haven't figured it out yet. But like no, most people do not know that libertarianism is like a serious ideology with thought put behind it. Most people hear libertarian in the United States and they think, Oh yeah, that's just get the government out of my life. I want to smoke weed.
Yeah. The
I
That's what it
common
recently
means.
perception
heard.
of libertarian is straight up just Ronald Reagan, but that smokes weed.
Yeah,
Pretty
Ronald
much.
Reagan
exactly.
never
The
did the drug war.
consequences of Milton Friedman and his actions. I recently asked Alexa, so I don't know if this is true or not. It does not feel true, but I just asked my
Doesn't
machine one
feel
day,
true.
what percentage of the American population believe taxation is theft? And apparently it's 3.8%, which seems way too high for me.
I
How do you
mean,
figure that out?
Yeah,
there's
how do you
there's the
get those
people
numbers?
who
Alexa,
like.
Alexa said it to me.
What source?
Therefore, it has to be
Source?
true.
The source
I
was
mean,
Alexa. Source
Well,
Alexa was like, "Trust me, bro."
well, a lot of people would like say it's theft, but be like, okay, it's theft, but it's good theft.
it's a
I mean, those
necessary.
people genuinely do exist, and those kind of people make me sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're called. Oh, that was. I'm not going to say that publicly.
You could
I'm not
put
going
it
to.
put it in the GC.
Yeah, please put it in the chat.
Hold on. There.
Let me-
What chat are we looking at? The living room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good thing you
That's-
caught yourself
Yes,
there.
I'm
They
not saying
steal
that.
everyone's
I'm not
stuff.
saying
They
that out
act like
loud.
they didn't
I
do
don't need
nothing.
that audio
Yeah.
clip
It
existing,
was-
but just know. Alright.
Most
Don't
people
say-
listening can
don't say
probably
that here.
guess.
They steal everyone's stuff and they act like they didn't do nothing.
Okay, bro.
The
Justify
state
theft.
is
Sorry, guys, had a
Um,
Kaufman moment there. Sorry.
The state is the ultimate.
Oh, Jesus.
Jeremy Kaufman is infiltrating my body and trying to take over.
Sorry, I'm becoming Lou Rockwell.
libertarian
my volition.
Zionism is real, guys. I'm Jeremy Kaufman.
Yeah, it's like the Green Goblin. He's like talking to me.
Have
and
you guys
stuff.
done a full episode yet on Jeremy Kaufman? Is that like gonna ever come up like
No,
strategy
we
and
have
stuff?
not. We've
That
talked
seems like it
about
should be, like, a full
strategy, but
episode.
not.
Strategy.
We haven't
Well,
like
next time,
talked about
next
LPNH
time
at
we'll
all.
have you on again, and you could talk about Jeremy Kaufman for 2 hours.
Jerry Kaufman.
Dude,
Jerry
there's a
Kaufman.
video. There's the video where Jeremy Kaufman, the members of the board of the Free State Project, which include that minarchist guy whose name I forgot, who works at AIER. He's also, I think, the one who founded the Free State Project. Anyway, point is, they basically tell him like, yeah, we're kicking you out, and that other lady, Carla Garrick or whatever her name is, who I think also is a big part of the Free State Project. There's this video where it's no, that's Carrie Ann Harlos or whatever her name is, Carol Ann, something like that. This lady's Carla. She's a South African lady who came to America and she lives in New Hampshire. Anyway, so they basically sit him down on the Zoom meeting of a meeting of the board, and they say, Jeremy, we have to kick you out of the Free State Project because your PR is too bad for us. We can't keep having you in our PR. And
I watched
Jeremy,
part of it.
dude, Jeremy's reaction to hearing this is maybe the most unmeasured, vitriolic thing I've ever heard. He's just like trying to keep his composure, but you could tell that he's a really angry guy. And the whole time he's just like trying to hold back him like starting to shout at these people.
Mm-hmm.
It's genuinely like I think the guy has some sort of like actual like anger management problems, because watching that clip, like it's not even a clip, it's like 2 hours long, and it's just him like constantly on the brink of bursting over, of boiling over. And
I
You know what?
remember
it's
I
like
have
a
something to
year
watch.
great
ago I
idea
watched
for a Liquid Zulu debate now.
Jeremy Kaufman debating like Dave Smith. I don't know if it was a formal debate, but they were like just arguing on a Twitter space, and Jeremy Kaufman was like screaming at Dave Smith because Dave Smith was refusing to say the N-word, which he eventually did anyway. And
Wait, what?
yeah, Jeremy
sounds
Kaufman
weird.
I
was
want that
yelling
clip.
at Dave Smith to say the N-word. Cause you're not like bold enough to say it.
You're not a real libertarian.
Yeah.
Like, chicken, bok, chicken.
This is where his priorities are.
Yeah,
This is
Jeremy
Jeremy Kaufman's
Real
priorities.
libertarianism
he
is
sort of
saying the
reminds
N-word on
me-
Twitter.
He
Actually
reminds
true.
me of a specific person who will not be named, of a specific person who also yet likes to yell in Discord VCs.
Are we talking about Liquid Zulu?
No, no,
No,
he
he
doesn't
doesn't
yell.
yell.
What? He doesn't yell.
I've seen him yell before.
Are you talking
Oh,
about
I,
me?
we're not
Is that who you're
dropping
talking about,
names.
James? Are you talking about
We're
me?
not- Oh yeah, we're talking about Shayne Killian. No,
Hi,
no, it's
everybody.
not Shayne
Shayne
Killian.
Killian here.
no, I think I know
Watch
who
the
he's
rest of this
talking about.
video to
Yeah.
understand how I derived the NAP. Did you ever see
We're
that? He made a video
only.
trying to derive the NAP.
Hold
Crazy
on,
stuff.
let me just. Is it that?
Let me see.
Let me look.
Oh,
No,
he.
no, no.
He.
Stop. I feel like if I
Sorry.
type this out, you're gonna say it.
Sorry, this is so weird.
It's not.
I
Oh,
feel like it
Who
should be.
okay, yeah,
yells?
that makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay, we
avoid
won't
name
say that.
dropping on the podcast, man.
you
We're
have
not
to
trying to
avoid the
start
name
beef here.
dropping. You have to avoid the
Weren't
name
we
dropping
supposed to end the
because there's a
podcast like
chance.
Yeah,
fucking
we're supposed
10
to end
minutes
it like
ago?
10 minutes ago.
All right. Well, we've basically dug our own graves in this 10 minutes, so
Yeah, we
let's
might have
close
to
this off
cut
before we have
that.
any
Yeah.
problems. There might have just been a cut there in the audio. Don't worry
This might
about
be
it.
the last
Everything's fine.
episode.
This is not an emergency. We might be getting stabbed. The Russian mafia might be out after us, but for now, things are all right.
LPNH is coming for us.
Gamerizer,
LPNH is
where can
gonna
I
kill it.
find? They're gonna find us and kill us. I live in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They're gonna come down across the border. Gamerizer.
Why is Shane like taking over like the role of host?
But that's good. Actually, he could have it. He could have it.
He's really
Where can we
expressive.
find your content? Well, you're gonna do it to me last, right? But I have to ask, where
Yeah.
can I find your content? If I
Yeah,
want to
you can
watch
find
or
me.
peruse
You
your material.
can find the podcast on Spotify, at the Living Room. You can find it on YouTube under my channel at Real Gamerizer. You can find me on Twitter at Gamerizer_, and you can find me on Instagram at Marcus A. Downing. James,
Hell yeah.
where can I
Hello?
find the mystical James?
The mystical. Okay. The mystical James. All right. Cool. You can find me at James Liberated on YouTube. I make videos. I try to have a consistent schedule of once every 2 weeks. The videos are relatively short, but I you might like them. You might like them. You can also find me on Twitter at Liberated James. I'm sometimes post there, sometimes. Schizoid.
Basically, you can find me here on Discord or on YouTube. YouTube at _schizoid_man. I make content about philosophy and economics when I feel like it. And it's good content, and you should subscribe. I'm kind of the talk of the town. What about you,
Shane.
Shane?
Oh my gosh, me. I don't make too much content, but what I do is I do the posts on X/Twitter. If you want to follow me there, it's at the real Iraqi. I know it's might fool you because it says Togashi, but just don't worry about it. And I also do have a YouTube channel, but I don't have anything on it yet, and I don't know if I ever will. But if you want to subscribe there, you can also subscribe to Togashi on YouTube. And yeah, thanks for having me on, fellas.
All right. See you.